Sorry, you didn't drop a mic then. Hello, afternoon.
Okay.
Just eating a cheese and onion sandwich. Pardon me. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming, and welcome to officers in Bakewell and Rebecca Cresswell for coming to take questions if necessary on this item. We have one item on the agenda today. Before we start, do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Leader, we've had apologies from Councillor Paul Griffiths and Francis Taylor.
Thank you. And I believe
Councillor Martin Grocott.
I believe for the record that Councillor Grocott is somewhere in France.
Yeah.
On a train, as is his wont.
But he was there in 1944, so I mean, he was
So, do we have any declarations of interest with regards to this item? Okay, let's move on to this. The Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan 2022 to 2027, which is our response to a requirement from the Welsh Government. I think, Councillor Birch, you're going to outline what our response has been and take us through the recommendations.
Thank you, Leader. So, yes, as said, rapid rehousing is an approach that recognises that homes are a fundamental human need, and that for many people who become homeless, their homelessness is bound up with other issues, which may be patterns of behaviour or trauma, addiction, mental illness, or I think as being increasingly recognised, neurodiversity, all the things that make holding down a tenancy, managing a home beyond the reach of some people who may become long-term homeless. And I think what has for a long time been clear is that once somebody becomes street homeless, their physical and mental health deteriorate rapidly. So the rapid rehousing and housing first approach combine accommodation with support, preventing that downward spiral, which is an approach which has been I think trialled previously and been running for a while in Scotland and in other parts of the world. So as you're aware, during the pandemic, the action was taken to ensure that everyone who was homeless was found accommodation, and additional funding was offered to put people up in hotels and guest houses or provide self-contained accommodation. And in England, I understand that our council reverted to statutory definitions of homelessness, with a duty to house people being dependent on tests such as intentionality and local residency and priority need. But here in Wales, the Welsh Government has required the local authorities to continue to provide accommodation for everyone who's homeless and to bring forward a plan to implement the rapid rehousing model. So this report sets out our plan, the actions to be taken between now and 2027. Of course, many of those have already started to implement rapid rehousing. And as it's evolved, which is why you can see in the report there is data going back some time, which has been collated to provide the background and needs assessment for the report. Plan has been developed through a steering group and based out on that thorough needs assessment. There are a lot of challenges. We've had to increase the staff resources dedicated to homelessness significantly. We have insufficient supported housing in the county, particularly people who need intensive support and limited grant aid to fund it. And we have insufficient affordable housing, and people are therefore spending far too long in temporary accommodation. And the challenges, I think, of wrapping that support around the person responding to their needs is huge. And I thoroughly admire these staff who are carrying out that support. It is a tremendously difficult, but also a tremendously important and transformative role. The numbers we're presenting as homeless have risen. Private rents have become less affordable for people, and then we are in the middle of obviously cost of living crisis, and we expect that to continue. This report sets out the plan in the format that is to be submitted to Welsh Government, and of course sits alongside the wider commitments that we've made on affordable housing and will be making in the community and corporate plan. And as the report says, homelessness can't be resolved through housing alone. Successful support for homeless people requires joint working between the housing services and social care and community and voluntary organisations, as well as the registered social landlords and indeed private landlords, to ensure that people are housed and given the support they need to make a success of that tenancy. I've been particularly impressed with regards to youth homelessness, where we have that partnership working with young people, and in some case identifying young people who are at risk of homelessness and their families at quite an early stage before they present as homeless. I'd like to thank the scrutiny members who gave the plan a thorough examination and constructive challenge. The report went to people's scrutiny at the beginning of March, and there were a number of issues that were brought up, particularly in the area of ensuring that users of the service are consulted about its development, which is an area where we're probably further behind than I would like to be. That is an area that does need to be taken forward. So I don't know if you have any questions about the report.
Thanks, Sarah. Councillor Birch, do you want to come in?
Only briefly, yes. Councillor Birch, thanks for that. And certainly homelessness is something that all elected members are concerned about, and particularly in an area like Monmouthshire with relatively expensive housing. I know the problem goes across Wales, but the area that I'm interested in is obviously for my portfolio, particularly care leavers. Technically, a child in foster care is deemed to be an adult at 18 and then goes normally from foster care and will be on their own. And I think that is a huge step if you compare that with as it were, a more average family where you have parents who are supported, whether kids go to university or to employment, but they've got a backup, haven't they? And I just wonder what, will this have a positive effect for care leavers? Because I do worry about care leavers. We had an engagement here last week, and Angela here was with me, because I think at 18 to be there managing, your own property, managing your budget, probably at times, like we all probably did, mismanaging it. Not being jocular about it, but in all seriousness, they haven't got the backup of parents to say, well, okay, we'll help you for this level, and now you've got to get back on track. And I think that is that is certainly there are PAs, personal assistants, who help from 18 to 25, but it's not the same as a parent. So I'm just hoping that this will help to ensure that care leavers don't become homeless, lose their home or lose their flat. So I'm really interested in that.
Yeah, and the needs of young people are very much part of this plan, and there's a specialist group with regards to the needs of young people. We do need more supported housing specifically for young people. As you say, we are corporate parents, and as corporate parents, we must expect that children do not just fly the nest at the age of 18, and that we continue to provide the support that they need. The aim of the rapid rehousing approach is that we do not have the revolving door of homelessness, which can otherwise become that downward spiral, and that the support wraps around the person. But it is that young people supported accommodation, and also perhaps support for people who have ongoing issues is certainly an issue. There's never enough of it.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor, maybe, I think I saw your hand up first.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wondered whether you had the latest figures on homelessness and any sense of how much we might be able to reduce it by in the near future.
Well, the team are very successful in terms of homelessness prevention, so that not everybody, who, in fact, the majority, I think, of people who present as in having a potentially homeless don't actually become homeless. However, at the moment we have 328 homeless applicants and 87 in households in bed and breakfast, which is obviously higher than any of us would like. And the average time in band 1 is currently 8.5 months. One of the priorities that is set out in the plan is to increase the amount of temporary accommodation that we have, which is good quality self-contained temporary accommodation, reducing the use of bed and breakfast. Not only is it extremely expensive for the authority, it's entirely unsatisfactory for most of the residents. Having said that, I think it was great that during the pandemic some of those bed and breakfast and hotel owners did step into the breach, but we do need to reduce our use of bed and breakfast, and certainly my aspiration would be that our temporary the people who need temporary accommodation are in self-contained accommodation, and the bed and breakfast hotels are full of tourists.
Yeah.
Not really a question, possibly an observation that might sort of impact in the future. Following on from what Judy was saying about our care leavers, at 18, foster carers are encouraged, hopefully they will consider becoming what's called a when I'm ready carer. And that means, they stay on then, and the child can stay on until they're 25. And that way they're still in a family environment. And that in that partnership with social care, we could certainly, if we can, get more of our foster carers to become when I'm ready carers, that means then that's taking, a big pressure off our housing stock as well, and having to find homes, and usually, unfortunately, they get put into hostels. Of what we've not got many of, they'll go to Newport and there are hostels, and not the best sort of place. So, a partnership certainly there would be really beneficial for the future.
Fully support that.
I think it's very important that joint working between homelessness and social care, particularly with regard to transition. I don't know if Dean wanted to.
Yeah, just to add to that, we previously tried to establish supported lodgings a few years ago, and unfortunately we only had one host that we managed to appoint, but we as part of this, it's one of the actions that we look to have another go at that. I think there's two slight differences to probably when we did it. I think it's probably about 4 or 5 years ago. I think one, we've got feel like the arrangements that we've got with social care, with children's services, are more structured, they're more mature. So I think we're better placed in that regard. Also, I think we can learn from the mistakes and the approach that was taken to trying to set it up previously. Probably less about mistakes, but I'd say just learning from that experience. We an external provider did it for us, and I suppose one of the things, do we ask another external provider? Do we do it ourselves? But I think, Councillor Burt said, I think the key thing is, can we link in more with that foster care type model? Because there's definitely, I don't think we'd be talking big numbers, but I think even if it was just a handful of hosts, to take a young person, again, takes a little bit of the pressure off our stock, but equally probably provides more appropriate home for that individual, which is obviously that's the key bit.
I think that raises the question. I think we're all well aware that this is a plan and therefore its resource implications are not going to be realised here. But what resource pressures will be put on us to meet this plan and how we're going to deal with it? It's laid out here, and I have a strong feeling that Councillor Garrick here would like to come in on that issue.
So, am I on mute?
No.
Fine.
Cool, thank you. Obviously, yeah, I do have the resources plan in front of me, and it's good to see that there is a very, very good strategy in terms of identifying where we can find and locate resources through multiple options in order to meet this. And I think as well, it's incredibly positive that what we're looking at is a very, very progressive plan to change our response to housing needs in the area when we are in a housing crisis. And the fact that the innovation that you've come to this cabinet with actually proposes to address the £1.865 million of cost pressures to this council on this is excellent. So I would like to thank you for the report and the work on this.
Absolutely, Councillor Garrett. I think we all recognise this at the start of having to do this plan, that the only way forward was to be bold, and the only way forward was to ensure that we were thinking about fresh ideas, innovations. I actually like the one of having hosts because it's building on that very successful model that I think Monmouthshire has been astoundingly good at with the way that we've hosted the Ukrainian refugees, and it's certainly indicated the altruism and kindness across Monmouthshire to support people who need our support. But going forward, we have to remain this agile and this open to picking up good practice from elsewhere and developing it and robustly monitoring our own emerging good practice and innovations. Councillor Fuchs.
Thank you, Councillor Brocklesby. Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question and kind of reflect on a section of the document around where it says we can't recover fully our costs because housing benefit doesn't cover the costs of those in B&B and hotel accommodation, leading to a budget deficit situation for the council. And I'm just wondering, I'm presuming that many councils in Wales are in this situation where housing benefit is set at a too low a level. So I just wondered if it would be a good thing to do for the WLGA or for other leaders and ourselves to write to the powers that be requesting that this is looked at, because this is one of the reasons why we have such a problem, isn't it? That housing benefit isn't adequate for to cover our housing costs.
Yes, I think it's technically local housing allowance and the housing payments within universal credit that are particularly an issue, and that is the mismatch between that and the rents that are charged locally is one of the major drivers of homelessness, whereas residually housing benefit is still paid for temporary and support and for people who are homeless. But yes, there is certainly, it doesn't cover the full costs of bed and breakfast, which is why it's quite urgent to secure very urgent to secure other accommodation for temporary use.
I believe, if it's okay to come in, that a large part of the issue is the anticipation that temporary accommodation will cease after a relatively short period. And I think Monmouthshire is far from alone across Wales and the UK in the fact that the need for housing at the moment is so steep that those temporary arrangements far outlast the time period that housing benefit will be paid for.
That is correct, Councillor Garrick. We're actually looking at a situation very similar to post-war, where temporary housing that was put up was still being used in the 1960s and 70s. The prefab.
And we are looking at exactly facing the same situation as many other councils in Wales. But I think particularly with the high house prices in Monmouthshire and the pressure that our close location to Bristol brings, particularly in the south of the county. It's probably, I think, the mismatch between earnings and house prices in Monmouthshire is some of the highest in Wales.
Rather than end on that note, do we have any more contributions?
Just very briefly, I think related to that point, really the fact that there isn't an adaptation of the housing allowance really that reflects the cost of private rentals as well. Yeah, I think that would be correct to say, wouldn't it? Yeah. That because it's a desirable place to live, that the private rental market doesn't match the needs of and what's actually provided through benefit of the it's not set at local levels, is it? No, is that correct? Yeah.
This is something which is outside our control, as I think both Councillor Garrett and Councillor Fuchs have recognised. This is a UK-wide issue, where I think councils across the UK are making representations. This is something, it's a live conversation in WLGA, because of the extent to which the Welsh Government has its hands tied in the ways in which it can respond on this one. And nevertheless, we're not talking about a one-track approach. I think as this paper lays out in terms of what we can do as a council, we have to do this in partnership, and it has to be multi-level. So what we can achieve on the ground with our residents can only happen if we are working at different levels, both in our position as politicians, but also as officers and the way that we engage. And I think that's one of the strengths of this paper, is it recognises that we are working within a highly volatile, highly dynamic environment in which, and if we do not have true partnership, that is partnership where we are collectively trying to find different ways of working that can respond quickly and put, as it says here, puts the person at the centre of it, not as a victim, not as a homeless victim, but as someone who deserves to be treated with dignity and that deserves to have a safe home in which to live in, and for us to help them transit through. I think going back to pre-COVID, it would have been unthinkable to this council to have numbers over 300 with the hands that were homeless. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ian, but you were looking at dozens at most, and often less, who were homeless.
Certainly pre-pandemic, like the numbers that we would have had in B&B would have probably been around 10, sometimes more, sometimes less, but typically only for perhaps a few weeks. Nothing on this scale.
And the scale we face, of course, really is faced by other councils. And as you so clearly pointed out, Councillor Birch, we have specific issues here. One of which, again, is raised here is to do with rural homelessness. which
Mm,
is often hidden,
mm.
as is rural poverty. And the two are obviously quite clearly linked. I'd like to draw us to a close, but before I do so, I think we all want to congratulate the officers for moving very quickly on this agenda. It's a newer one, to come up with a plan which is very clear, very focused, and has obviously been done in conjunction with the key partners that we need involved in taking this forward. Were you attempting to say something, Councillor Garrick?
I was just wondering, were we going to take a vote on the acceptance of the
Yeah, I was
report?
just coming to that.
Sorry. When you said you were closed, I panicked. I'm awfully sorry. Lisa.
I just wanted to.
But can I just say one thing? You know, social services and children's services, I think we work closely with housing, but I would reiterate that, and certainly, you know, my sort of point of view as a cabinet member, etc. I want to build on that, you know, certainly from a care leaver perspective. I think relationships are good, but you know, it is to everybody's benefit. So anything we can do, you know, obviously, you know, the door's open. That's great. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. So I've lost my train of.
I'm so sorry.
You did. I was looking at Councillor Garrett. Okay, so we come on to the two recommendations, and just for the record, I'd point out that this is a dynamic document that we are going to decide on today. It will be coming back at later dates, and I think both ourselves and scrutiny would be expecting updates as we move forward. So we have two recommendations. The first, to consider the findings, which I think we've done. Are we all agreed?
Yes.
I think that's a yes, Nick. And secondly, to approve and adopt the draft rapid rehousing transition plan and action plan. And are we all agreed to that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. So thank you very much, Cabinet. I believe we're staying on to have a further discussion on a different matter. So if you could stay online, please. And thank you very much, Rich, for turning up. Appreciate that.
That's okay. Happy to stay if you'd like me to. See you soon. Take care.
You
Yeah,
go
Rich.
first.
We'd love you to, Rich. But